Roll call, Ms. Mayweather.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Mr. Rashke.
Here.
Mr. Culberson.
Here.
Mr. Kent.
Here.
Mr. Pedersen.
Here.
And Ms. Konishi is here. We have before us the meeting minutes from the February meeting.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Mayweather. Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mr. Rashke.
Yes.
Mr. Culberson.
Yes.
Mr. Kent.
Yes.
Mr. Pedersen.
Aye.
And Ms. Konishi approves. I'll turn it over to our city attorney.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustments and Appeals. This is a board comprised of members from our community. They are appointed by our city commission. They are not city employees, and they have the authority to hear and decide requests for variances where literal enforcement of our city's land development code would create an undue or necessary hardship, and where granting that variance would be contrary to public interest. The way the procedures work today, the chair will call each applicant forward. If you could please state your name, address, and give a brief description of what you are requesting, what your variance entails. City staff will be permitted to also present any information. And then if there are any members from the public that wish to speak for or against a particular variance, they'll be able to do so as well. I would ask, if you are planning to speak before the board today, that you go ahead and stand at this time and I go ahead and swear you in. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. So our first applicant today is David Tavlin, Crossroads Construction of Florida. This is a request for a 10-foot variance to allow a 5-foot rear yard setback in lieu of the 15-foot minimum rear yard setback specified for PUD zoning for Sandpiper Golf and Country Club to allow for the construction of a new screen room with a hard roof on the property located at 611 Avocet Avenue. Who is here to represent? Do we have anyone here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
If you could come
please come
forward.
Captain, excuse me, I'm hard of hearing amongst many other faults I have.
And if you all could just please speak in the mic too, because sometimes it's difficult for us to hear as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Can you please state your name and address and give us a brief description of what your application is for?
My name is David Tavlin. I'm president of Crossroads Construction. I also own the Sandpiper Golf Course. We're developing 40 houses. Some of those are golf course frontage, and unfortunately, golfers are not very good golfers sometimes. So some of these golf course frontage homes that are near the golf greens or in areas where balls can fly, we're trying to put hard roofs, which requires a variance. The variance backs up to my golf course. So basically, just that simple. I mean, just a hard roof to protect these homes a little better from bad golf.
Okay, thank you. City comments?
Hi, good morning. Damaris Stahl, Senior Planner of Community Economic Development. The property is zoned in PUD 5705 with the Suburban Neighborhood Context Subdistrict. This request is for a 10-foot variance to allow a 5-foot rear yard setback in lieu of the 15-foot minimum setback specified in the PUD zoning for Sandpiper Golf and Country Club, to allow for the construction of the new screen room with a hard roof located at property 611 Avocet Avenue. The property consists of a 80 by 80 deep corner lot with a new 2,200 square foot single family detached home. The home is currently under construction, and the proposed request is to obtain this variance release to allow for the new screen room. Here are a couple of photos of the home being under construction. This is the northeast corner facing south of the home. And this here is the southeast corner facing west. And the southwest corner facing northeast. And it's just another angle facing of the southwest corner facing east. The specific hardship in this situation relates to the irregular lot geometry and the depth of the lot in Sandpiper subdivision. Typical lots in this community are about only 90 feet deep, which allows very little buildable area. While this is unique to only Sandpiper subdivision, a precedent has been established by the board in which it grants variances for screen rooms abutting the golf course. The request relief would not be contrary to public interest. The hardship suffered is not due to any action taken by the applicant. The amount of relief is requested is minimum amount necessary to accommodate the proposed screen room due to the lack of variable alternatives and minimal impact to the adjacent property. Therefore, staff recommends the request for this approval.
Thank you. There's no one in the audience, I'm assuming, so. Any questions from the board?
Can we see the picture of the house again and where it's gonna,
Sir, I apologize, I'm a little hard of hearing, so,
I was talking to the staff,
okay.
where's it going?
So
Right
it was,
there?
it's proposed for this area here.
And a better picture. Do you have the other back pic? You had the other picture that showed the rear better. Can you show that
Oh,
one
yes,
from the other angle? Right
yes.
there. I think that's the patio door. Those two plywood.
It almost,
Yeah, the screen room goes right along the back of what you see there. And as you can see, it takes a long time to get sliding glass doors too.
almost looks like it's gonna be right on the slope.
Actually, we've got to adjust that a little bit out. You can see in the distance that PVC pipe that's in the ground. When we started the development, we had to modify the golf course, and we just went basically by guess. Actually, that PVC pipe is 20 feet long. I mean, that's how much the grade has changed. It was just basically a shot in the dark to get the golf course modified, to get the development ready. So we still have a little bit of adjustment to do right there on that pond to bring it out and get it a little more level to give them their full backyard, if you will, without the slope.
You're filling it in with more dirt, is what you're saying. You're going to do.
A little bit. It's not as bad as it looks, but yeah, it'll be filled in with a little more dirt right there. And again, I own the golf course, so I'll be modifying basically my golf course to fit their lot. It's just, there might be 3 or 4 feet there to give them back to their property line level.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Mayweather? Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Rashke?
Yes.
Mr. Culberson?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Pedersen?
Aye.
And Ms. Cornishi, yes. It's approved.
Good?
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
This next application, I work for the Lens Group, so I have to recuse myself. This is for the record. The application is for 1016 South Boulevard. The request is for a 12-foot 7-inch variance to allow a rear yard setback of 2 foot 3 inch in lieu of the 15-foot minimum rear yard setback for principal structures specified by Table 3.4-1 of the Land Development Code in order to build an addition which will connect the existing single-family detached home to an existing 2-story guest house on the property located at 1016 South Boulevard. For the record, can you state your name and address?
Brad Lunds, 58 Lake Morton Drive.
Thank you. Can you give us a description of your application?
I have a little longer than just a description if you don't. Would you prefer the presentation before or after staff's comments?
Oh, let's go before.
Okay. And we have 2 videos of the abutting neighbors, both north and south. Rather than have them come in, they were willing to do videos, so we can do that during public comment, or we can do that as part of our presentation if you'd prefer. So,
We can do that as public comment.
okay.
big one's forward, the little one's back, and then it's like a target.
Okay.
If you wanted to highlight something.
So I'm going to walk through our project timeline. This started as, you're wondering, why is an architect sitting here? We walked through a historic preservation first, and then as we went through the historic preservation process, we were told to come to Zoning Board of Appeals to make the adjustment. Our go-to, which we'll end with, is 700 East Walnut, which processed through historic preservation in 2018, which is under the current land development code, as well as the current historic preservation guidelines. So we're going to show that there is precedent and it has passed through. Even though it is an O1 zoning, it is a variance. So Jeannie and Ryan approached me because they are trying to convert what is a single-family home with a detached accessory dwelling into a owner-occupied, complete single-family home as they increase the size of their family. So Jeannie is expecting, so they're trying to convert what is a smaller house into a larger house to make it, so one would argue that's a hardship, but that's self-perpetuating, so we can't really push that one. So we went through, we wanted to save the back, the two-story garage, and it is extremely tight. It sits on the existing back side. So we looked at a volume that sat within the side yard setback and then how it attached back. Historic had no comments as we looked at it, and there's also multiple existing conditions, including 3 within 1 block of the applicant. So when we look at the site plan, they've got a 692 square foot addition. We presented this, it abutted directly to the existing guest house. So in lieu of having an accessory dwelling, they're willing to give up the right of rental, which is within what the neighborhood is trying to accomplish here. So we're following public interest in that regard by getting rid of rental structures on a single family property. When we went through review, we got a comment that we had to go through planning and zoning. So they said, okay, what are the concerns? What are the elements? As we looked at it, it was really, hey, we're in violation of the rear yard setback of 15 feet. When we look back, our addition, we're like, hey, we're within 15 feet. I don't understand this. And this is important because when we look at 700 East Walnut, they were within, but they're in violation. So we came back, we're allowed to do this. We're allowed to keep 3 feet between the 2 structures open and have a detached house and an accessory dwelling. So staff comments were really related to the 0 lot line or the very close proximity to alley. These conditions, no matter if you grant or don't grant the variance, will exist because this is our second course of action. And it makes no sense when we're trying to create a single family home that we have a detached element. So I'm going to walk through a whole variety of examples. And if we look, Lopez Weaver is located at the 1016. 1029, 1033, and 410 are within a block and a half of the applicant, and they all have attached accessory dwellings that have made it into a single family home. 724 Success, it's a 0 lot line on the alley. It's attached, it's a breezeway, it is not conditioned space, but it acts as a single structure. 746 Mississippi, same condition. Now the argument is that these are all done prior to the new land development code, but these are the fabric within the community, within the South Lake Morton district. This is the form that is there. 410 East Park sits on the side yard setback. You can see specifically sort of that small piece where they convert it, like it drops back down toward the back side, and they've got a rear yard setback of less than 5 feet. 631 Mississippi, same condition. And you can start to see how these houses have started to join together. What was an accessory dwelling or an accessory garage and a single family home. 730 College, this looks like it may not be permitted, so code enforcement might want to go out there regarding the attachment. 1033 South Boulevard, which sits half a block down on the left side. You can see it's attached. It was detached at one point. Whether or not, again, we couldn't pull a lot of the records to determine what was happening. The only one we could pull was the 700 East Walnut. 1029 South, which is right across the street, same condition, attached garage, single-family home. Now 700 East Walnut, and the argument when we brought this forward was this is an O1 occupant, or an O1 zoning. It's a UNH O1, which makes the rear yard setback not 15 feet, but 20. So when it went through HPB, the site plan attached shows a 12.1 foot rear yard setback. Staff reviewed it, staff comment, furthermore, the addition is appropriately placed to the rear of the house and the setback from the facades of both the house and accessory dwelling consistent with the guidelines. Furthermore, setback from the facades of both the house and accessory dwelling or accessory building consistent with the guidelines. When we look back at the O1 context, it's 20 feet. 12.1 feet. So we're thinking to ourselves, this is how it paints. We have a precedent. We go through HPB. HPB, it's looking at it as a rear yard setback. It's only the addition. All the documentation points us that we're going down this path. I'm arguing that the hardship we've got is a little bit of inconsistency here. We have a precedent that goes all the way back to the 70s, and we've got a dozen residences that have done this. We have one that's done with the new LDC, and we've done one that's under historic preservation, and staff has accepted it. So what we're looking for is we're looking for a 692-foot addition. The guest house will remain. So the concerns about public works, that element of public interest will always be there, because if it's an accessory dwelling or if it's connected to the single-family home, it's going to exist. It's the intention of the owners to keep that structure because of its historic nature. So we'll either do this if we grant the variance, or we'll pull the building off 3 feet and just renovate the guest house. So when staff goes through their commentary, they're going to go through and talk about alley access. They're going to talk about accessory dwelling. I want to be very clear. The applicant wants to do a single-family home. Has nothing to do with an accessory dwelling. They're willing to give up that right in exchange for a consistency that exists within the fabric of the South Lake Morton District that has more than a dozen precedents that you're pulling from. I'm not asking you guys to reach further into past. I'm saying that my client drives around and gets frustrated because everyone else has done it. And when they follow the rules, they get squashed. So with that, these are the two options. Site Plan B, which is that 3-foot difference, or the proposed addition. This is what's not allowed by current land use, but this is. With that, I'll let staff give a presentation. We do have the support of both the north and the south neighbor, indicating that they don't see a reason for it, but you can hear it in their own words. And we'll turn it over to staff, and we're available for questions.
Yeah, can you go back to our slideshow? Good morning. For the record, Todd Vargo with the Community and Economic Development Department. The lot in question is in the South Lake Morton Historic District and also within the South Lake Morton Special Public Interest District. It is a 1,768 square foot single family detached home and a 2-story 936 square foot guest house, both constructed in 1937 according to the property appraisers. Is zoned RA4 and is within the urban neighborhood. I think Mr. Lowndes already showed this, or at least something close to it, the survey. As he stated, the purpose of this request is to obtain variance to allow for the construction of a 693 square foot addition, which would attach the existing single family to the existing guest house. Here's the addition here. If approved, the guest house would then become part of the living area of the principal structure, and the use of the structure as a secondary dwelling unit or a guest house would be terminated. The resulting structure would have a total floor area of just under 3,400 square feet. Justification is that the variance is necessary in order to allow the addition on the rear of the home and preserve the guest house. So as I stated, the lot is in the South Lake Morton Special Public Interest District, which was created in 1988. And under the Special Public Interest District, secondary residential structures such as guest houses and garage apartments that were in existence prior to the effective date of the ordinance are conforming. They grandfathered them in because they weren't going to make all these people demolish their structures. However, if destroyed or otherwise removed, structures like the guest house, which here's a picture from the alleyway, if destroyed or otherwise removed, structures like the guest house may be reconstructed in accordance with the current development standards in the SPI, which is a 10-foot rear setback. So if anything ever happened to this guest house, it could be reconstructed, but it would have to be 10 feet back from the rear property line. The SPI went on to say such structures, however, may not be increased in size, and any alterations which increase the degree of nonconformity are expressly prohibited. So the guest house is set back approximately 2.3 feet from the rear property line. And is considered to be legal nonconforming in respect to that 10-foot minimum rear yard setback that we talked about in the SPI. Again, it was legal when it was created in 1937, but it doesn't conform to today's standards that were approved in 1988 through the Special Public Interest District. In addition to that standard, the Special Public Interest District also states that guest houses and detached residential structures need to be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the principal structure on the lot or the parcel. So the site plan B that Mr. Lund showed you would not fly. It can't be 3 feet from there. It has to be at least 10 feet according to the Special Public Interest District. And here's a photo. You can see there's about 30 feet, and you can see it better from the survey that was submitted. There's about 50 feet from the rear of the principal residential structure to the property line, and then the guest house is about 18.3 feet or so wide and another 2 feet. So they've got about 30 feet between the guest house and the back of the principal structure. The guest house, again, constructed in 1937 at the same time as the existing historic single-family home. The guest house is not listed as a contributing structure to the South Lake Morton Historic District. This picture is of the alleyway, which is part of the problem. The adjacent alleyway, which provides rear yard access for all the houses on this block, is used for the location of overhead utilities. You can see them there at the top, and you can see the poles there. And is also used for the collection of trash, recycling, and yard waste by the city's solid waste division. And you can see right there is the recycling bin and the trash pickup. Due to the narrow width of the alleyway, which is approximately 10 feet wide, non-conforming structures such as fences, sheds, detached garages, and garage apartments located on or immediately adjacent to the alley present a significant hazard to the solid waste collection vehicles. Due to accidental collisions with these structures Each year, solid waste spends tens of thousands of dollars to settle claims pertaining to the damage of private property. And remember, we're not saying this is the fault of anybody. This was built in 1937. So there's no blame going around, but it's a fact that the solid waste spends tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars every year due to accidental collisions with structures that impose on the setbacks. The economic risk and liability of the city is significantly increased due to the proximity of the dwelling to the alley traffic surface. If the requested variance is approved, this structure with its 2.3-foot rear yard setback would become conforming and could be rebuilt if it was ever destroyed or damaged. It could be rebuilt at the same location, if granted the variance, of course. It is the intent of the South Lake Morton Special Public Interest District that secondary residential structures be separate from and subordinate to the principal structure on the lot or parcel. Approval of this request would allow for a significant expansion of the footprint of the existing single-family home. Approval would result in the creation of a new nonconformity and the intensification of an existing nonconformity by reducing the internal setback between the principal structure and the secondary residential structure from 30 feet to 0 feet. Remember that the Special Public Interest District says that you have to have 10 feet between there. And reducing the effective rear yard setback of the principal structure from 51.5 feet to 2.3 feet, which again, their site plan shows that there should be a 15-foot setback from the rear property line. We don't believe the applicant has demonstrated any kind of unique hardship with the land which would justify the requested variance relief. With a distance of 30 feet between the principal structure and the guest house, the applicant has ample room to construct an addition on the rear of the home while complying with the setbacks specified in the Special Public Interest District. Again, you have to have the 10 feet between the principal structure and the existing guest house, so that leaves them enough room to do a 20-foot addition on the rear of the property. The circumstances of this request are not unique, as there are multiple examples of similar detached secondary residential structures throughout the neighborhood. Yes, there are some that Mr. Lunds pointed out that have already connected. I don't know when those all were connected. The one that he brought up on Walnut Street was done in, it was 2018, Matt?
November 2018.
Yeah, 2018. So if the applicant wishes to construct a larger addition, they could do so, again, maintaining the 10-foot setback between the guest house and the new rear line of the principal structure. Approval of the request would be contrary to the public interest and would establish a precedent for similar variances in the future due to the self-imposed nature of the hardship, inconsistency with the spirit and intent of the Special Public Interest District, and the long-term liability that it presents to the city. Staff just can't recommend approval of this variance request. And I'll stand for questions.
Thank you.
In your presentation, you talked about, I thought I heard you say it was approved by the Historical Committee.
It was reviewed
When was
by-
it? When was that?
2018. It was reviewed by Emily Foster and Matt Lyons.
This property?
I was not reviewing that, sir.
Actually, the meeting reflects that. The minutes that were approved reflect that.
I was not a reviewer of that.
At any rate, it was reviewed by planning. It states, if you go back to the presentation, we can pull that up.
This property came before the Historical Committee?
And it
Or
was,
it was talked about on another property?
so this came, the sequencing was, we saw what they did. The Walnut Street's right behind my office. We're working on the multifamily behind it, and it was a question of, wow, they did this, let's see how they did this. And they went to historic preservation. Historic preservation typically will go through planning and zoning to ensure compatibility with both the urban context standards or the context standards, as well as in the SPI. And so we're like, okay, this is within the 20 feet. So maybe they're only talking about the addition, so we put in the application. We went ahead, did the application. It kicked back saying, hold up, you've got to go to ZBA if you want to do this. They have no intention of wanting to keep this as an accessory dwelling. This they want to convert into part of the single-family house, whether they're willing to give up the address. So if the 10-foot, and when staff brings up the 10-foot, when we talked, and I talked with Matt Lyons and Emily Foster, 3 foot was the number presented, and that's where we came. We didn't pull it out of thin air.
Sir, that was what you presented initially. We talked about 10 feet, and we said we thought it would be the fire separation. But upon further review of the SPI would actually overrule the standard provision in the code for accessory structure. So that's where the 10-foot setback comes from.
And they never shared that back after the information. They know we submitted a 3 foot, but we never received that information back. I mean, yes, there's plenty of examples. The inconsistency of information we're getting and the ability to navigate this system is difficult. When you see what Walnut did, they have an existing. There's a precedent, and you guys didn't even have a chance to weigh in on it.
But in your presentation, you made it sound like this property went in front of the historical.
It did, and then they got pulled. It got kicked by staff because it didn't meet planning.
So it did not go in front of the committee.
Historic has not reviewed this yet.
Okay, that was my question.
Okay,
Did they
I'm
review it?
sorry, Mr. Kent.
Because it sounded like it was approved.
It was not approved because staff,
Right, but it made it sound like this property.
oh, we wanted to go through historic. Staff told us to come here first.
So let me be clear. The real argument here, because what it seems like is either they're building it either way, and nothing is going to change in this neighborhood. In fact, the only thing that will change is that we get rid of more rental units. Either they're building it with 3 feet more or without, but the look, the buildings, what exists, the hardship, all the stuff you mentioned about waste management, none of that's going to change. Even if they abide by what you're saying, it doesn't change anything of what you said. The only thing that changes is this 3 feet that if we say no, they don't, hang on.
10 feet is the real
No, it's 3 feet. They're going to build their addition and not connect it with 3 feet of space.
10 feet is the requirement.
No, you're missing the point. There is no requirement. It's the requirement if they tear this down, but they're not going to. They're going to keep this building there regardless of what we say. So the whole look of the neighborhood remains the same, but now you have another rental in this neighborhood which is riddled with bad tenants. I mean, I don't know if you've been down some of these streets, but some of these tenants are not, the best tenants. So if we say no, they build it without an additional 3 feet connecting the two. If we say yes, they connect it and we get rid of a rental.
So your understanding of the code is not correct.
And I'll support Matt here. If we
I'm not talking about code right now. I'm talking about the look and feel of the neighborhood. The code is 10-foot setback if this building disappears, but this building will not disappear.
No.
Adding on to it,
It's 10 feet between
If it's
this
an
building
structures
and the
is a
next
minimum
building.
requirement.
So it was their understanding that there were 3 feet. Now the city is saying that it's no longer 3 feet. They went back, they looked at the code again. Now it's
Because
10 feet.
the overlay requirement requires the 10-foot distance. So what Mr. Lunds was trying to say, we can either, you grant the variance and you can connect those two, or initially he said that there would be, then the option would be the 3 feet in between the accessory structure and
So
the
the
primary.
scheme is wrong then, is what
But-
you're
So
saying.
here's what we were presented, and I want to be very clear. When we were in a meeting, it was myself, Emily, and Matt, and we discussed it. They said we could connect the structures without conditioned space.
with a breezeway.
So I can connect it so it can be 0, and the form can be the same. I just carve out a breezeway, which is 3 feet, or 4 feet, or 10 feet. Whatever that is, it's a 10-foot porch that's sitting between the two. The roof line's connected. So from a fire separation, it has 0. So we're going to keep an exasperated or a non-conforming condition on the back side no matter what. It's a matter of what's conditioned underneath there. And the unconditioned space means I'm just going to have a larger buildable footprint and take away from green space because I'm going to maximize the lot. So if I take the 10-foot space and go the 20-foot out, I'm taking out 200 square feet that I'm going to apply closer, maybe go forward a little bit, and then impact that. because we're trying to maximize the space we have, and we're coming out laterally. And it is, whatever the setback is, the argument regarding the public works is an existing condition. It just sounds like it's going to stay. If it's 3 feet, if it's 10 feet, we're going to build and we're going to tie the roof lines together, because that's allowed.
Is that allowed?
You could do a 10-foot breezeway between the house and the guest house.
And it doesn't,
Mr.
and we can
Pedersen,
keep it a guest house then.
And you would keep the guest house with the breezeway.
With the breezeway, we can keep the guest house. If we connect it, we get rid of the guest house.
So looking at this picture, that alleyway, it's stated that you would have a little extension coming out in the alleyway.
No, we're not. No.
Okay.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Everything is actually existing to the right of the picture you don't see. So
Okay.
everything we're building is within. So if we were to lose, because we'll have to do a secondary structure, if Public Works hit the building and we have to demolish it, and it goes back to a non-conforming condition, we can go back to where that setback is, and what we're building would meet the 15-foot rear yard setback. And that's, and our quandary really is, we're sitting there looking at 700 East Walnut, and when we look at it, they have a 12.1 rear yard setback shown on the site plan. Staff said that the rear yard setback was appropriate. It's in the minutes. We said, okay, this is a precedent. This is under the current LDC. This is under South Lake Morton. This is underneath all of the other contexts we have to go to. Let's just follow historic preservation. We'll get the check.
Just to clarify that 700 East Walnut is actually within the garden district. It's not within South Lake Morton SPI. This is a different area, and the setback I stated earlier, for single family and O1, it would be with the RA3, RA4 urban neighborhood standard, so it would actually be a 15-foot setback.
20.
Not 20 feet as you stated there for single family.
So the
20 feet would be for non-residential uses.
And
There is a footnote in the use table that says in accordance with RA3, RA4 standards, Mr. Lyons.
Okay, so 15 foot is still not conforming.
Correct. I discussed this
Okay.
with Ms. Foster, and she made, when she did the staff review, she made an error there, and that should have been part of variance.
Okay.
and if they were to tear the building down and just build this entire addition, they would have to do 10 foot from the alleyway, right?
15 feet from the alley.
15. Oh, I thought I heard him say 10.
15 if it's attached.
Yeah, 10 if it's a guest house. So that I think, Mr. Pedersen, goes to your argument or your question is, yes, right now, nothing will change. But if you grant the variance,
It becomes a conforming structure.
it becomes a conforming structure and can be rebuilt at that location, again, impacting public works. If the variance isn't granted, it's a non-conforming structure and if it ever got damaged, it would have to be rebuilt to the setbacks.
Can we ask that
I have a
not
question.
be addressed as a conforming piece, that if the guest house were damaged, that we lose the right to rebuild to that footprint?
I have a question. Is that something so that if, depending on, can we make that a condition? That if it was granted, if something happened to that structure, the secondary structure?
Problem is, once they attach it,
Wait, let me
it
finish.
becomes part of the principal structure. Oh, you go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt.
So can we make it a condition that if they attach the roof, it became one structure, if something happened to that, what's the existing structure, can we make it a condition that if something happens, they have to go back to the 15-foot setback?
The issue
We
with
have
that under
done that
our code
in-
is the variance you're granting would effectively allow that structure, the principal structure, to have a 2.3-foot setback. So the principal structure would be the entire structure, the existing house, the addition, and the guest house. And I mean, it sounds like you're almost adding a caveat. You want to keep the non-conforming status, but you want to let them create this new non-conformity. I guess that's something we don't really have a precedent for. And I'm not sure under how we define damage typically under code, as you saw last year with the former duplex. It's based on 50% of the replacement cost is the threshold for which you lose that status. And I'm not sure how that would apply to the whole structure. If that were, you know, if they were hit by a truck, would it reach that point where they had to remove it and go back to the 15-foot setback? I guess I'm not sure
Yeah.
how that would actually.
I guess where I'm confused too is it sounds like they want to save an existing structure, and you guys, like, well, not you guys, but sorry, he's hinting at, oh, this building is such a hardship, we're hoping that you tear this down so that way we can get everyone in this neighborhood eventually to slide their buildings back. And then doesn't that go against the whole historic preservation point of it? I mean, I live in a 1920s home.
Well, that was the hardship this did on the application, was that they did not want to have to demolish the
Yeah.
guest house. But they do have 30 feet between structures, 20 feet.
I
They can
get
do an
that, but to
addition
give them
currently
what
there.
they want to save this structure. To give you what you want for them to have one unit, you want them to basically say, well, if you want that, you have to demo this 100-plus-year-old structure to get what you want. And that seems contrary to what we're trying to do in
They
this.
don't want to keep the guest house, they want to make it part of the house.
We want to keep.
But the
form.
structure itself is what's historic, not what its use is, correct?
Well, the use word was historic too.
Well, and the guest house is not a contributing structure.
Say that again?
The guest house is not a contributing structure to the South Lake Morton Historic District.
How
When you
many,
say contributing, what do you mean?
When the district was created,
Matt, you're gonna have to speak in the mic. I just got a message saying they can't hear you.
when the historic district was created in the early 80s, they did a survey of all the properties in the district
Yeah.
based on their architectural significance, the area they were built, their condition. They were declared either contributing or non-contributing. So contributing structures are generally ones that are significant, and they support the district. They contribute to its function, its cultural purpose. Accessory structures, for a variety of reasons, were not included, so they do not have the same protection that the existing home would have.
and that's a point. No accessory structure. I mean, the accessory structures were excluded from the initial survey. And the district, it's not the individual structures that are historic, it's the fabric itself. I served on HPB for quite some time, so understand the nature of that. So when they did the survey, they were looking at the initial main house and to support that.
So how many of them are already, how many did you say are already grandfathered in, that were grandfathered in? How many?
Well, this structure was built in 1937. The city's first zoning code was 1950, so anything that was built before 1950 is automatically legal non-conforming. So that's not unusual. The fact that you have the situation where you have a structure that close to the alley there, but the code says, you know, when something does happen, you know, if it's removed or damaged sufficiently, it has to be brought into conformance here, and you can't increase the degree of nonconformity. And that was specific to the SPI that Mr. Vargo mentioned, that language there. So that.
Well, I asked that because just wondering, because the ones that are grandfathered in, is what they're trying to do does have that look of what's already grandfathered in, the ones that were grandfathered in? Is that what their plan is?
No, they want to connect the house to the detached garage. Currently, if you go back to the photo.
You're welcome to pull up our HPB application
But her question is,
and the revised application.
your question is, does it look like the other ones they're referencing? And the answer would be yes. I mean, I
Yes.
drive by these things every day. I live by 2 of them. I mean, I've seen numerous, and whether they were grandfathered in or not, I've seen structures like this.
We received very positive commentary from Ms. Foster regarding, there was a roof line piece she wanted to adjust, but in terms of the form and what we're proposing, she was very supportive of it. So we were going to get a positive staff recommendation regarding the form itself and the architectural styling.
You said you had comments from neighbors?
Yeah, so Lauren, who lives to the north, and if you want to pull up the video, Ryan walked over and asked them. So Lauren Howell is one. You can just click on the entry 4 video map. And Ruthie is to the south. Lauren spends a lot of time looking to these. So he enjoys the front porch
Hey, this is Lauren at 1010 South Boulevard. He's one house north of 1016. Lauren, you've received the notice of the variance through the mail, and you're okay with it? You don't have any objections?
No, not a bit.
And you're perfectly okay with them putting in connecting the two structures?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Yeah. Hey, this is Lauren at 1010 South. All right, here we are with Ruthie. She's at 1018 South Boulevard. She's one house to the south of the specific house. And Ruthie, you've read the letter that was issued to you from the City of Lakeland, the courtesy letter, and you're perfectly okay with these houses being connected.
I have read the letter, and I think it's a great idea. So don't worry about me. It's a good idea.
Perfect.
Ruthie is the one that will be impacted the most. That's the side that the house is being proposed to be built on, the addition.
And Ruth is the owner of the property next door?
I don't think so. She's a resident, and she's the owner. Yeah.
Just trying to clarify if she did that owner or did not.
Did the city hear from anybody else, any of the other residents?
No, we didn't hear from anyone, positive or negative.
And just as a reminder to the board, the land development code, as it relates to the administrative provisions of the Zoning Board of Adjustment Appeals, requires 5 affirmative votes to pass a variance, to approve the variance request. So just keep that in mind as you're discussing this and as you're moving forward.
And so, Matt, for clarity on direction, depending on if it's approved, we can do it to connect. If it's not approved, we can connect the roof line with a 10-foot gap of breezeway between the two structures.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
And just to further clarify the conversation about the other examples that Mr. Buns showed, this neighborhood is 100 years old or older in many cases, and many of those structures typically decades ago when the zoning was very different and the permitting requirements were very different. We cannot speculate how those things were created or whether they were even legally permitted. I will speak from experience. The city as a whole does have a problem with unlicensed contractors doing work without permits, and particularly when things are not done where they are visible from the street. It's very easy to do minor additions, outbuildings, other structures without the necessary approvals, and they never get caught. So I would not consider that by itself to be justification for what is being requested. And I would ask that you consider the nature of the hardship and whether it is warranted here.
It's a motion to approve.
We have a motion.
I approve.
We have a second. Put it to the vote. Ms. Mayweather?
Yes, approve.
Ms. Schaefer?
No.
Mr. Rashke?
Yes.
Mr. Culberson?
No.
Mr. Kent?
No.
Mr. Patterson?
Aye.
So we did not have 5 affirmative votes to approve.
And you'll be advising on the appeal structure to go back to commission on this?
No, it would
This-
be through the, go ahead, sorry.
The appeal process wouldn't be through the commission. It would be filing an action in court.
Okay.
There's no appeal. It's a little bit different than the P&Z process.
Can we modify and apply for a PUD then? I mean, there's other ways to get through it then. I mean, it's-
Anything like that would probably have to be done. the ZBA only deals with the request for variances, so a PUD, that type of thing would go through the P&Z process.
And I utterly respect the position you have to sit in. So this is a commentary more towards city. The precedent that was set and the mistake made paints the wrong perspective. The true hardship here is the inconsistency to navigate the city. And it's frustrating for my clients to go through this process. When we're given information, 3 foot, then they don't advise us that it's 10 foot because they reviewed the SPI, but I can connect the house. The inconsistency is disheartening. But I understand where you guys sit and respect that completely. It's not an easy one at all. So I appreciate the service you're doing, and it is volunteer. You get like one breakfast or a dinner, like a dessert thing.
No.
You used to. They cut the budget.
Pre-COVID. I give you a minute back.
But thank you all. And then we'll look for the appeal, Ramona.
Can I make a comment? And it's a good point. There are times when things are brought to us in the variance, but there's something else about it that they're not bringing to us, but they still need to consider. And this was another example of that. Does the city not tell you everything when you go in? Might be a loaded question, but a meeting or two ago, we were approving the setback, and we approved it, but you pointed out the carport was not in compliance, which did not come before us, but the applicant didn't know that. So I'm just wondering if there's any way to tell individuals everything they're presenting, or I don't know. Maybe I live in a Pollyanna world.
Well, sometimes that's a little bit difficult depending, but I mean, I think city staff does try to make sure that folks understand when they come before a particular board, like the authority of the Zoning Board of Adjustment and Appeals, it's strictly related to approval of variances, requests for, setbacks, that type of thing, fencing height. And I know sometimes we tend to discuss like material and what it's constructed of, and you'll hear staff routinely say it has to comply with the code. Our land development code has certain requirements, but the purview of the ZBA wouldn't be to approve a certain material because that's a separate issue addressed by the code, and failure to comply with that would trigger a code enforcement violation or something of that nature. But city staff, I mean, we may not always be able to catch everything, and to Mr. Lunz's point, I understand that sometimes it's frustrating for folks to come in and not really sure how to navigate the process, but we really do try very hard to help and direct citizens to the right department or try to make sure that they understand what is happening, because even if this would have been approved today, Mr. Lunz, to his point, still would have had to go before the Historic Preservation Board in terms of you wouldn't have any control over the design of how the structure looked or anything like that. So that would be a totally separate, and I know sometimes it feels a little disjointed, but we do try.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Would it have impacted decision-making process if we had gone through historic preservation first with approval?
It would have for me. I can only speak for myself.
Okay. We were guided by staff to avoid historic preservation, just first and come here first. We wanted to go to historic preservation. We felt that was a powerful thing. And there are some underlying issues. There are some potential neighborhood conflicts. And it is frustrating to have my clients be the brunt of that. So again, this is just airing things not towards you. The Diaz protects you, and really respect the service. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any unfinished business we need to discuss? Any new business?
So can I ask a question? So to make sure I understand, though it wasn't approved, they still have that another option to go. the other
Yeah,
place
as
to go.
Mr. Lenz, I think, was saying, I think, but of course, that initial misunderstanding of the 3 feet. So what they can do is construct that 10-foot breezeway between the two structures. That certainly is alternative. Although it's also his option, if he chooses to litigate the matter and appeal it, he would have to appeal it in circuit court, and that would go from there. But
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're adjourned. This one wasn't.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, wasn't expecting.
Sorry you had to go back to work to that.
I was